We're here to give to you. What do you need?
All right. So I'm Jeff, and I'm a pastor at Apologia Church, and your name is?
Jesse Gibson.
Jesse. Okay, Jesse. So let me see your sign. Choose life. Why are you here today?
Because, well, I'm pro-life. I support, I support women's health, but I also support the, everyone has a right to be born and to make their own choices in their life. So, I'm here to support the idea that we should not have institutions that support the killing of children. And I understand that not everyone believes that they are children. I think that's the root of the problem.
Right.
I don't think all these people are out here because they hate children. They're out here because they don't believe that they are children. And I'm here to stand to say that unborn children are still people. They are still children. They have their own rights.
Okay. So how'd you find out about the rally?
One of my friends told me about it. I actually hadn't heard about it until just last night.
Okay. Do you go to a church around here?
I go to the Newman Center at ASU.
What's it called?
The Newman Center at ASU.
What's the Newman Center?
It's a Catholic church over at the Newman Center.
Okay.
At ASU. So on a university and college.
Okay. Hadn't heard about that. So I've been asking the people on the pro-life side today. I'm among the pro-life side, of course. How do we end abortion? What do you think is the ultimate goal? What are we trying to get to in terms of legislation?
Like I said, I don't really think that, because I think most people are pro-choice as far as like choosing what to do with your own body, your own self.
Yeah, we all agree with that.
Yeah, and everyone is pro. I think most people aren't actually pro-death or pro-abortion. They're pro the right to choose, but the disconnect is believing when life is actually life. And so I think that's the biggest problem, is trying to convince people that, I come from I have a medical background.
Oh, good.
I'm not a doctor or anything, but so I had to study the reproductive system, things like that, and it's just apparent that how am I trying to say this? That when people can't define when specifically a person becomes a person, the viability of a child is getting less and less. My mom actually works in the NICU at St. Joe's, and what a child was considered being able to be born, being able to survive outside the womb, was much longer than it is now with medical advancements. And so because of that, to me, what I don't understand is if the idea of viability is moving back farther and farther, are people becoming people earlier and earlier now? Or is a child have worth? A child has worth after it's born, but 50 years ago it didn't have worth at that point.
Right.
So I think that's
the inconsistencies need to get addressed.
Yeah, and it's and like I said, I kind of don't like the hate on both sides, or I don't think it's constructive.
Okay.
For me, it's let's decide. Let's even put religion aside. I am religious, but we can put religion aside and just say, if everyone wants to protect a human, they want to protect a life. When I'd say if you don't know exactly when it becomes, when is viability, you don't exactly know. But if you aren't 100% sure, why don't you err on the side of caution when we're talking about an actual life?
Last week I was over there talking with the Planned Parenthood supporters, and they acknowledged that it was a child, and they said that they should be able to kill their own child. They acknowledged it is a human, and I ought to be able to kill it. What would you say to them? Because you don't want religion to be a part of the question.
Well, that's
what I would say to them.
okay. Okay, see, he's not a person that agrees that it's a child. He thinks it's a sack of cells. But people that actually agree that it is a child and you should be able to kill it, there's just... I actually don't believe that they believe that. Because if I said, okay, say we put in a one-child policy in America where you can only have one child, like they say they did that in China, and they're like, well, you can have one child and you're able to kill your own child so that say you have a woman, you want a male, or you want a male, you want a woman, and someone said, you can go kill that child. I'll bet that most of the world would oppose that policy. So if you think that child is actually a child, I guess I wouldn't know what to say to a person that thinks that you should be able to kill actual children that you think, like, if that person is equal, if you're saying that that is equal to a 5-year-old.
I've been doing this for 3 years, and outside of abortion mills, really around the state. And the most common thing I think we get from women going in that are upset that we're there is they're saying, "I know it's a baby. I'm allowed to kill my baby." Or the Planned Parenthood supporters over there, when you get to the bottom of the science, that from the moment of conception, it has all the biological components of a human being, has its own distinct DNA. It's the you that you are now, just small and not fully developed. What they'll typically do is when you get through the science, you get to the bedrock, they'll say, "Yeah, I know it's a human, and I ought to be able to kill it."
I honestly don't know. Like, I don't know what you can say.
What I mean is, and I just think in terms of like we should think as pro-lifers about consistency. I hear that often, that we just, take religion out of the question for a minute, take Jesus out of the question for a minute. When we do that, I think we lose the foundation of ultimately being able to say, because God says, image of God, and you shall not murder. Because ultimately the secularists will say, I can kill it anyway. I don't care.
No, and honestly, I feel religion and stating your religion is important.
Yeah.
I just think for me, it's so much of an easier argument to make from a biological and health standpoint, because when you're fighting from a religious standpoint, you're fighting the idea of religion and you're fighting the idea of abortion. Whereas when you're fighting just the idea of abortion, you can just focus on medical.
Don't you think that the religious question and the scientific question are really intertwined?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
And it's just. It's sometimes it can be hard to argue one because there's no common ground there. Like some people, they're complete atheists. They don't believe that there's any higher power. There's any like soul, and so sometimes it's hard to say, well, this child has a soul. That's why we should protect it. If they don't believe in a soul, they don't believe in.
Right. Well, let me ask you just do this quickly. So, if we were to work together as a pro-life movement on how do we actually speak to our legislators? What do we want them to put on the books? What should be on the books in any state across the country in terms of abortion, the abortion question? Is it murder?
I think, of course, it's murder.
Okay.
And I think that's the biggest problem is people don't define it as murder, because there are people like what you're talking about who are like, fine, I think it's a child. I think they just are so hard into their beliefs that they will not relent to the fact that they shouldn't be able to have an abortion.
That's right.
So I do think it should be. I think one way we can really start is there's true like that a lot of like Planned Parenthood is considered a women's center.
Yeah.
There's a women's center going up over here. If we had a lot more of those options, there's a lot less of the argument for Planned Parenthood. Sure. So if there were little non-abortion clinics that offered all the women's services all around the country, there's much less that you can actually say.
Yeah.
Right? Because most of these people are saying that, women's health, it's all about women's ability to have affordable health care.
Yeah.
So I think that's, in my opinion, I think that would be like the first step is create those so that there is less of an argument there.
But in terms of the legislation, we do want it to be called murder.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so the abortionist would be charged with murder if it's against the law on Wednesday and he does it on Thursday. We want him to be charged with murder.
Yes.
Okay, how about the woman?
Gosh, it's so hard because I want to be charitable to people, and I want people to feel like even if they do something like that.
100%.
But I do think like if legislation was saying that abortion is murder and you commit an abortion, then it just logically follows that you are committing murder.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I think I appreciate you saying that, because I think one of the failures of the pro-life movement in the last 40 years is inconsistency on this particular point. Is we say in our huddles, this is murder, it's against God's law, it's murder. Science displays human being, God's word says you should not murder. But then we go to our legislators and we nibble around the edges of abortion and we say, no, cleaner abortion facilities and take away this tool. When in reality, what we ought to be saying to legislators so that they can actually put law down is human being, if you kill it, it's murder. Anybody who does it is murder. The legislators would understand that.
Well, and what I don't really understand is for a long time the idea of a double homicide when you kill a pregnant woman. I don't understand how you can have that. And really what you're saying is the intention of that woman to have the child is what made it a child.
Right.
But that, if you are trying to take God out of the equation, that makes no sense.
That's right.
So.
That's right. Wonderful. You've been awesome, man.